There's this moment when you realize the floor you've been standing on was never real. You reach for something, anything, but it's just air. That's where I'm at right now. Somewhere between the disbelief and the aching pit in my chest that refuses to go away. It was supposed to be the happiest week of my life. 5 days before the wedding, and everyone kept telling me how lucky I was to have someone like Marlene. She's a catch, Emery. You better hold on to her tight, they said. I smiled and nodded and swallowed every stupid word like it was gospel. What they didn't know was that Marlene had a different kind of surprise planned for me. One that didn't come wrapped in a ribbon or sealed with a kiss. It happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. We were at her mom's house pretending to care about the final seating chart. Marlene leaned over, tapped her manicured nails against my coffee cup, and said it like she was offering me a second helping of dessert. One little fling before we tie the knot. No big deal. Your mom even said it's fine. I blinked, laughed even. I thought she was joking, playing one of her weird, dry humor games, but her eyes stayed dead serious. She tilted her head, smiled like she was talking about the weather, and then just shrugged. That shrug broke something inside me. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I didn't demand answers. I just sat there like a piece of furniture, nodding like an idiot, pretending I hadn't just heard the love of my life tell me she needed someone else's hands on her before she could marry me. I drove home alone that night. I don't even remember the drive. Just the rain hammering against the windshield and my knuckles turning white on the steering wheel. I sat in my car for hours, watching the wipers smear the world into a gray, meaningless mess. By the time I stumbled inside, there was already a message waiting for me on the kitchen counter, clearing my head. Love you. No apology, no explanation, just that. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I just stared at the ceiling, asking myself the same pathetic questions over and over again. Was I not enough? Was this normal? And was I just too uptight to understand it? Was love supposed to hurt this much? 24 hours later, my phone vibrated itself off the nightstand. 100 missed calls, 100 tiny explosions I didn't have the courage to answer. And somewhere deep down, I already knew. The real nightmare hadn't even started yet. I didn't touch my phone for a long time. It just sat there buzzing and lighting up like a desperate animal trying to get my attention. 100 missed calls. Marlene's name over and over. Sometimes her mom's, sometimes even random numbers I didn't recognize. I stared at it like it wasn't even real. Like maybe if I ignored it long enough, the world on the other end would collapse and leave me in peace. Eventually, curiosity cracked me open. I listened to one voicemail, then another. Her voice frantic, crying, begging. Please, Emery, pick up. I need you. I'm so sorry. Please don't do anything crazy. Please call me back. The more I listened, the more I hated myself for wanting to comfort her, for feeling that pull to be the man she could lean on after she shoved a knife into my chest. I wanted to believe it was just a misunderstanding, some terrible joke gone wrong. I needed to believe that because the alternative, the truth, felt too big, too ugly to carry. So, I did the only thing a coward like me could think of. I drove to her apartment. The drive was a blur. I couldn't even tell you how I got there. I only remember the heavy feeling in my gut like I was dragging a dead part of myself along for the ride. When I pulled into her complex, I saw her car parked outside. Good. At least she was here. I climbed the stairs like my legs were filled with cement. The door was slightly open. I pushed it with my fingertips and it creaked inward. And there she was, Marlene, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, her face red and puffy from crying, clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. When she saw me, she scrambled to her feet and rushed over. Emery, thank God, she sobbed, reaching for me. I flinched so hard you'd think she had a weapon. Maybe she did, just not one you could see. Talk, I said, my voice cracking like dry wood. She opened her mouth, and for a second, nothing came out. Then, in a rush, it was stupid. It didn't mean anything. It was just one night. I didn't even know his name. It was supposed to be a joke, a dare. I didn't think you'd find out. I didn't think you'd care. You're overreacting. I held up my hand. Stop, I said, quieter this time. Just stop. The air between us went heavy. I could smell her perfume, sickly sweet, clinging to everything like a lie you can't wash off. "You said my mom was okay with this," I whispered. "You told me she thought it was normal." Marlene's face crumbled. I lied. "I just thought if you heard it from her, you'd forgive me faster." I don't remember walking out. One minute I was standing in front of her, feeling like my heart was folding in half, and the next minute I was outside, the door slamming behind me so hard the whole complex seemed to shudder. I got in my car, turned off my phone, and drove again. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. Anywhere but here. Anywhere but in the skin that felt too tight, too raw to keep living in. And deep down, a tiny, spiteful seed started to grow. If Marlene wanted chaos, maybe I could show her what real chaos looked like. I don't know how long I drove. Hours, maybe. Long enough that the sun disappeared and the highways turned into winding black rivers under my headlights. I ended up 2 towns over at some nameless motel with a flickering vacancy sign buzzing in the dark. I didn't plan it. I just pulled into the lot like something invisible was steering me. I paid cash at the front desk, ignoring the clerk's suspicious glance, and took a key to a room that smelled like stale cigarettes and old regrets. I sat on the bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, trying to piece my mind back together, but it kept slipping through my fingers. Was it really that easy for her? One stupid dare, one random guy, and she was willing to throw everything away. 5 years of memories, of promises whispered in the dark, of plans for kids and anniversaries and growing old together. All for a night she couldn't even defend without lying about my own mother. I pulled out my phone and turned it back on. Instantly, it exploded with texts and voicemails. Some from Marlene, some from friends, and even one from her brother, who I had always gotten along with. I didn't read them. Couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I opened my notes app and my fingers started moving before my brain could catch up. I wrote down everything she had said, word for word. Then I wrote down everything I was feeling. The humiliation, the anger, the ache that sat in my chest like a boulder I couldn't lift. I didn't know why I was doing it. Maybe I just didn't want to forget. Maybe I needed it documented somewhere so when the inevitable gaslighting came, I could hold up my own pain like a shield. Hours must have passed because when I finally looked up from my phone, the sky outside was pale and bruised. Morning. I hadn't slept at all. My head pounded and my mouth tasted like ash. But I didn't care. I had an idea now. Something petty, something low, but something that for the first time in 24 miserable hours made me feel like I could breathe again. I wasn't going to scream at Marlene. I wasn't going to beg or fight or cry in front of her. No. I was going to make her feel what it was like to watch something precious slip right through her fingers, knowing she had no one to blame but herself. I packed up my few things, paid for another night just in case, and headed out. I didn't go home. I didn't call her. I went somewhere I knew she'd never expect. My cousin Daryl's garage. Daryl was the black sheep of the family. The guy everyone warned you about. Tattoos, bad credit, more ex-wives than anyone could count. But he was loyal. And more importantly, he owed me big time for covering his mess a few years back. When I showed up at his place, Daryl didn't ask questions. He just handed me a coffee, clapped me on the back and said, "Tell me who needs crying, and we'll make it happen." It wasn't exactly legal advice, but right now, it was exactly what I needed. We spent the next couple of hours plotting. Nothing illegal, nothing violent, just smart, slow, devastating little moves. Things Marlene wouldn't even realize were happening until it was far too late to fix them. If she wanted freedom so badly, I was going to give it to her. More freedom than she could handle. I didn't even recognize myself anymore. There I was, sitting on a ripped-up couch in Daryl's dingy garage, plotting the slow collapse of the woman I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with. A part of me, the broken, bleeding part, whispered that I was better than this, that revenge wouldn't heal anything. But another part, louder and more desperate, told me that if I didn't do something, anything, I would drown in the humiliation she handed me with a smile. Daryl leaned back, balancing a screwdriver between his fingers like it was a cigar, and said, "Start simple. Make her life just a little harder every day. Death by 1,000 cuts, cousin." You don't got to swing a hammer to knock down a house. Sometimes all it takes is pulling out the nails one by one. It sounded cruel. It was cruel. But when you're standing in the ashes of your future, kindness starts to feel like a stupid game you already lost. So I nodded, feeling the first real surge of strength I'd had since Marlene dropped her little confession like a bomb. We started with her bridal shower. It was supposed to happen 2 days later. A big, fancy event her mother had spent months planning, complete with catered food, custom decorations, and a rented hall downtown. Perfect opportunity. I still had access to the guest list, the venue contacts, everything. I called the hall first thing that morning, pretending to be her brother. Told them the event was canceled due to a family tragedy. Refund the deposit? Nah, donate it to charity. My sister would want that. Then I sent an anonymous email to the caterer. The bride has called everything off. Thanks for your time. And just to make sure it spread like wildfire, I tipped off a couple of Marlene's gossipy aunts that something terrible had happened between her and me. By noon, the entire bridal shower was ashes. Guests were calling her, texting her, trying to figure out what was going on. Meanwhile, I sat with Daryl, drinking cheap gas station coffee, and waiting for the next move. She called me 13 times. I didn't answer once. When that didn't work, she showed up at Daryl's garage. I saw her through the dirty window, pacing back and forth, clutching her phone. Her hair tied in a messy bun like she hadn't slept either. For a second, just one stupid second, I almost opened the door, almost ran to her like a lost dog. But then I remembered her words, her casual shrug, her betrayal like it was nothing more than a wrong order at a restaurant. I stayed seated, watched her knock, watched her cry, watched her give up and drive away. It hurt more than I can describe, like peeling off my own skin just to prove to myself that I still felt something. After she left, Daryl clapped me on the shoulder. That's one nail, cousin. Plenty more where that came from. That night, back in my motel room, I finally opened my messages. It was worse than I expected. Apologies so desperate they barely made sense. Promises to change. Begging to meet. Telling me she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. It was like watching someone try to put out a wildfire with a single glass of water. And through it all, she still didn't seem to understand. She thought I was angry. She thought I was heartbroken. She thought maybe if she cried hard enough, I'd come back. She didn't realize she hadn't just broken my heart. She had burned down the whole damn house, and I wasn't going to rebuild it for her this time. The next few days passed in a haze of quiet, deliberate destruction. Every morning I woke up in that stale motel room with its stained curtains and broken TV remote. And every morning I found a new way to loosen another nail in the life Marlene had so carefully built for herself. I wasn't fast. I wasn't loud. I was slow, methodical, like a river wearing down stone. And it was working. First, I reached out to her workplace. Nothing dramatic. Just an anonymous email to the HR department linking to her now private social media posts from her so-called bachelorette weekend. Photos she thought she had deleted, but which, thanks to some tech-savvy help from Daryl, I had saved. Pictures of Marlene drunk, sitting in some stranger's lap, wearing a sash that read, "Final Fling Queen." A small scandal, nothing fireable, but just enough to nudge her professional reputation sideways. Enough to make the promotion she bragged about suddenly seem a little out of reach. Next, I quietly pulled out of the house we were supposed to move into. It had been in my name the whole time. Marlene wanted it that way, said she didn't want the stress of paperwork. So, I called the realtor, canceled the final paperwork, and listed the property for sale again. She didn't even know yet. I smiled at the thought of her showing up with her moving boxes only to find a for sale sign hammered into the lawn where her dream house was supposed to be. It wasn't just the big things either. It was the little cuts that hurt the worst. The DJ for the wedding canceled. The wedding photographer canceled. The florist, oh, she was the best one. I told her there was a family death and that Marlene would be too upset to handle anything herself. She was kind enough to spread that rumor among the wedding vendors, ensuring that every vendor thought Marlene was either heartbroken, irresponsible, or simply gone crazy. Meanwhile, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Marlene had gone from frantic to hysterical. The messages turned darker, more desperate. Please, Emery, just tell me where you are. We can fix this. I swear to you it meant nothing. You're my best friend. You're my only family. I'll do anything. Anything. Funny how anything only appears once they've already thrown everything away. I didn't respond. Not once. I knew if I heard her voice, I might crumble. Might start believing her again. Might let the waves of guilt and pity drown the tiny part of me still holding on to self-respect. One night, maybe around 2 a.m., there was a knock at my motel door. I froze, heart hammering in my chest. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I just listened to the soft sound of her crying outside, her voice broken, whispering my name like a prayer. Emery, please, please. I pressed my back against the door, teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached. I pictured her on the other side, knees pulled up to her chest, mascara running down her face, all broken and lost. And for a moment, the old Emery, the fool who believed love could survive anything, reached for the doorknob. But I didn't open it. Couldn't. Because I realized then that the girl crying in the hallway wasn't Marlene anymore. She was a ghost and I had already buried her. The knocking eventually stopped. The crying faded. I stayed there sitting in the dark, feeling both triumphant and hollow. Winning didn't feel the way I thought it would. It didn't taste like revenge. It tasted like ashes. Morning light crept into the motel room like a thief, dull and gray. And I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling like I hadn't slept in weeks. In a way, I hadn't. Sleep didn't come easy when your entire life had turned into a hollow version of itself. When the sun rose fully, I knew it was time for the final moves. Not some childish outburst. Not a screaming match. Something quiet, irreversible, and clean. I packed my few things into a duffel bag and checked out of the motel without a word. The clerk barely looked up from his crossword puzzle. I could have been a ghost for all he cared. Perfect. I wasn't Emery Jacobs anymore. I was the echo of him, a man who used to exist in another life where wedding plans and love letters and promises had meant something. I drove straight to my bank. Months earlier, Marlene had convinced me to open a joint wedding account to cover honeymoon expenses. It'll feel more real if we're building it together, she said, pressing her soft hands over mine, her smile lighting up her whole face. God, I was such a fool. I transferred every penny back into my personal account without hesitation. Legally, it was mine. I had funded 90% of it anyway while she saved, by spending on spa weekends and bachelorette trips she called necessary. Next, I visited the courthouse. I filed a restraining order, not because I thought she'd hurt me, but because I needed a clean, public statement. This was over. This wasn't a lover's quarrel. Wasn't cold feet before the wedding. This was done. I made sure to have copies sent to her address and her workplace. After that, I stopped by my mom's house. She was standing in the kitchen when I walked in, wiping her hands on a dish towel, eyes wide with worry. Before she could say anything, I pulled her into a hug so tight it nearly crushed us both. She held me like she had when I was 6 years old and had skinned my knees on the playground. No questions, no judgment, just warmth. We sat at the kitchen table sipping bad coffee as I told her everything. Every word Marlene had said, every lie she had told in my mother's name. When I finished, Mom reached across the table, took my hand, and said simply, "You deserve better, and you will have better." I didn't cry. I thought I might, but instead, I felt something strange, a thread of peace weaving itself through the chaos. Later that afternoon, as I sat in a quiet corner of the park, watching the leaves tremble in the breeze, I turned my phone back on one last time. A flood of messages poured in. Dozens from Marlene, a few from her mother, some even from mutual friends who were either furious or confused or trying to play peacemaker. But one message stopped me cold. It was from Marlene. No desperation this time, no apologies, just a photo. It was our wedding invitation torn in half and burning slowly on what looked like her kitchen counter. The caption underneath it said, "I hope you're happy." And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I realized I was not the kind of happy you shout from rooftops, not the kind of happy you celebrate with champagne, but a quiet, exhausted happiness. The kind that comes from surviving something you thought would kill you. Marlene had played her final card, and I hadn't even needed to lift a finger. She destroyed herself trying to hurt me, and now all that was left was freedom. The days that followed were quiet in the kind of way that almost felt unnatural. No buzzing phone vibrating itself off the nightstand. No late-night knocks at the door. No desperate voicemails sobbing my name. It was like Marlene had finally understood the full gravity of what she had done. Or maybe she had just gotten tired of screaming into the void. Either way, the silence wrapped itself around me. Both a comfort and a heavy reminder that some endings didn't come with explosions. Some ended with a whimper you could barely hear unless you were really listening. I moved back into my old apartment, the tiny one-bedroom I had never bothered to sublet when Marlene and I started house hunting. It smelled like dust and old laundry detergent, but it was mine, the kind of lonely that at least didn't come with betrayal attached to it. I spent the first night sleeping on a mattress on the floor, staring up at the cracked paint on the ceiling, feeling a strange mixture of grief and relief settle into my bones. Every now and then, I caught myself reaching for my phone, half expecting another explosion, another plea, another excuse disguised as an apology. But it stayed stubbornly still, a cold slab of glass and metal that didn't care about my pain. Eventually, I stopped checking it altogether. I went back to work, too. Walked into the office with the fake smiles and the awkward side eyes from people who had clearly heard whispers about what had happened. Small towns had long memories and fast mouths. I could feel the sympathy hanging in the air like a heavy perfume. And I hated it. Hated that I had become someone to be pitied. Hated that no matter how straight I stood or how steady my voice sounded, people would look at me and think, that's the guy whose fiancée blew it all up days before their wedding. But I didn't lash out. Didn't correct their assumptions or defend myself. What would be the point? People believe whatever version of a story makes them feel better about their own lives. Let them. One afternoon, maybe a week after the whole world came crashing down, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name scrolled in handwriting I knew too well. I sat there for a long time just staring at it before finally tearing it open with fingers that didn't feel like my own. Inside was a short note scribbled on wedding stationery. I wish I could say something that would fix it, but there's nothing left to fix. I'll always love you in the way broken people love things they destroy. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. No signature, no explanations, no promises. Just those few broken sentences dangling in the white space like a noose. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just folded the note neatly, placed it back in the envelope, and dropped it into the trash without ceremony. Because the truth was, I didn't need her sorry anymore. I didn't need anything from her. Marlene had made her choices and I had made mine. She taught me that love built on lies is a house made of paper, ready to catch fire at the first careless spark. And now, as painful as it was to admit, I was free to build something real, something sturdy, something no storm could tear down. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday. And she would never be a part of it. Not ever again. Weeks turned into months. Life, stubborn and steady, found a way to move forward even when I thought I couldn't. The mornings stopped feeling so heavy. The nights stopped echoing with everything I had lost. Somewhere along the way, the silence that used to choke me started to feel like breathing room. I started doing small things I hadn't done in years. Went hiking alone on dusty trails that cut through the hills outside town. Learned how to cook something besides microwave dinners. Even picked up an old guitar from a pawn shop and taught myself a few clumsy chords. They weren't big victories, not the kind you shout about on social media, but they were mine. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't living for someone else's expectations. I wasn't bending myself into shapes to fit inside someone else's life. I was just living honestly, quietly, fully. One evening, as the sun dipped low and spilled gold across the streets, I found myself sitting outside a little coffee shop downtown. I was flipping through a secondhand novel when I heard a soft laugh from the next table over. Not a fake, Instagram-worthy giggle, but a real, belly-deep laugh that made you want to laugh too, even if you didn't know the joke. I looked up and there she was. Not Marlene. Someone new. Someone real. Her name was Cassidy. She wore her hair in a messy bun, had paint on her jeans, and talked with her hands like she couldn't help but pour her whole soul into every conversation. She wasn't polished like Marlene wasn't rehearsed. She was genuine in a way that felt almost foreign to me after so much time spent living in someone else's performance. We started talking about books, about bad coffee, about why sunsets always feel a little sad and a little beautiful at the same time. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't movie scene magic. It was better. It was easy. Weeks after that first meeting, sitting across from Cassidy at that same coffee shop, I realized something that almost made me laugh out loud. If Marlene hadn't broken me, I might never have found my way here. If she hadn't betrayed me, I would have spent a lifetime trapped in a beautiful lie, too scared to admit how hollow it all felt. Sometimes losing everything isn't the end. Sometimes it's the clean slate you never knew you needed. I'm not saying it didn't hurt. It did. God, it did. But now, looking back, I don't feel broken anymore. I feel free. I feel whole. And as Cassidy smiled at me across the table, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, I realized something even bigger. I wasn't just surviving. I was finally living the life I deserved. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone else write my story for me.